Nicole Holt stood quietly near the glass door of the executive meeting room, a slim leather folder held neatly against her side. The room was bright with polished steel, long screens, and the faint hum of quiet authority. She was dressed simply, neutral tones, no visible logos, nothing that demanded attention. To anyone watching, she looked like she had wandered in by mistake. That assumption was confirmed when Vanessa Reed's voice cut sharply through the room. "Get her out of here," Vanessa said, her tone clipped with embarrassment. Every head turned. Nicole did not flinch. "Before I continue, I need to ask you for a favor. We're working toward our first 1,000 subscribers, and your support truly makes a difference. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It's completely free, like this video, and tell me where you're watching from. That single click helps this channel grow and allows me to keep bringing you stories like this." Vanessa, her older sister, stared at her with irritation, not recognition. To her, Nicole was still the same quiet sibling who never talked about work, never bragged, never explained where her time went. "This is a partners-only meeting," Vanessa snapped, turning to the assistant. "Why is she even here?" The room held its breath. Nicole said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence, when chosen carefully, could be far more powerful than defense. Emily Russ, the executive assistant, hesitated before responding. "She's cleared for this meeting," she said carefully, glancing down at her tablet. Vanessa scoffed. "That's impossible. She doesn't work here." A few executives exchanged uncertain looks, unsure whether to intervene. Nicole remained still, her expression calm, almost detached. She had anticipated this moment for months. 6 months earlier, the company had been on the brink of collapse, cash flow tightening, expansion plans failing, and investors quietly pulling out to protect themselves. The board had searched desperately for a private solution, someone willing to step in discreetly without triggering panic in the market. That solution had arrived quietly, through a holding firm with no public ties. Legal teams handled everything under strict confidentiality agreements. Only the CEO and 2 board members knew the truth. Nicole had insisted on it. She wanted the company stabilized before her identity was revealed. Now, standing in the room her sister believed she didn't belong in, Nicole felt the weight of timing settle perfectly into place. "Escort her out," Vanessa said again, louder this time, trying to reclaim control of the room. Before Emily could move, Richard Hale finally spoke. His voice was calm, measured, and carried enough authority to silence everyone instantly. "Actually," he said, "she stays." Vanessa turned toward him, stunned. "Sir, you don't understand," she said quickly. "She's my sister. She has nothing to do with this meeting." Richard studied Nicole for a brief moment, then offered a faint, knowing smile. "I understand perfectly," he replied. The room went completely still. Nicole stepped forward at last, walking to the table with unhurried confidence. She placed her folder down gently, the sound barely audible yet unmistakable. Vanessa's face tightened as confusion replaced irritation. "Nicole, what is this?" she whispered. Nicole opened the folder and slid a document across the polished table toward her sister. Vanessa's eyes dropped to the heading, then froze. The color drained from her face as she read the words, "Major Stakeholder Agreement." Nicole's name was printed clearly, followed by a signature and an official company seal. "I think," Nicole said calmly as she took a seat, "we should begin the meeting." No one spoke. The silence was heavy, the kind that forces people to reassess everything they thought they understood. Vanessa looked around the table, searching for an explanation, but the board members only nodded politely. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. This means you're the investor?" Nicole nodded once. "I don't manage day-to-day operations," she said evenly, "but I control the capital and long-term strategy. The funding that stabilized the company last quarter came through my firm." Vanessa shook her head slowly, disbelief written across her face. "You're joking." "I'm not," Nicole replied. "The payroll continuity, the halted layoffs, the renewed expansion plans, they were covered through my channels." Richard cleared his throat gently. "Ms. Holt has been instrumental in keeping this company solvent," he said. "Her identity was kept confidential to avoid internal bias and conflict. Today is the appropriate time for transparency." Vanessa's confidence visibly fractured as the reality settled in. Nicole opened her folder again and distributed documents to the board. "I've outlined a revised strategy for Q2, she said, her tone professional and composed. It includes reallocated investments, a conservative merger approach, and projected revenue stabilization within 2 quarters. The executives leaned forward, engaged. Vanessa remained frozen, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "You tested us," she said quietly, the realization stinging. Nicole met her gaze without malice. "I observed leadership under pressure," she said. "And the company endured. That matters." She paused, then added, "But respect matters too." Vanessa looked down, the narrative she had carried for years unraveling in seconds. She had misjudged her sister completely. As Richard moved the meeting forward, Nicole leaned back slightly, allowing the moment to settle. Power, she knew, did not need to announce itself loudly. Sometimes it simply waited, patient and unseen, until the right room, and the right moment, made denial impossible. The meeting moved forward, but the atmosphere had permanently shifted. Charts appeared on the screen, projections replaced confusion, and the room slowly returned to motion. Yet Vanessa sat rigid, barely hearing the discussion around her. Every confident decision she had made over the past months now echoed differently in her mind. Nicole spoke when needed, never overbearing, never performative, but when she did, people listened. Her questions were precise. Her observations revealed deep familiarity with the company's vulnerabilities and strengths. Vanessa noticed how naturally the executives deferred to her, how Richard Hale occasionally glanced in her direction before confirming a point. This was not coincidence or ceremony. Nicole had earned this position long before stepping into the room. Vanessa felt a tightening in her chest, a mix of embarrassment and something sharper, regret. She remembered years of dismissive comments, subtle superiority, the unspoken assumption that Nicole lacked ambition. Watching her now, calm and authoritative, Vanessa realized she had never truly asked who her sister had become. The truth was uncomfortable. Nicole had not only outgrown her expectations, she had surpassed them entirely, without ever demanding recognition. As the discussion turned to future leadership alignment, Nicole closed her folder. "There's one more point," she said, her voice steady. "Internal culture." The room stilled again, though this time without tension. "When people are underestimated, they disengage," she continued. "But when they are trusted, they deliver. This company survived because its teams adapted under pressure. That deserves acknowledgement." A few board members nodded thoughtfully. Richard agreed. "That's something we'll address moving forward." Vanessa swallowed hard. The message was clear, and it wasn't abstract. It was personal. Nicole wasn't attacking her, but she wasn't shielding her either. She was setting a standard. When the meeting finally adjourned, chairs slid back and quiet conversations resumed. Executives filed out in clusters, energized by clarity and renewed direction. Vanessa remained seated for a moment longer, gathering herself. Nicole stood, thanked the board, and exchanged a brief word with Richard. There was no triumph in her expression, only resolve. Vanessa watched her sister walk toward the exit, realizing she had just witnessed a shift she could never undo. The hallway outside the meeting room was quieter, softened by carpet and distant office noise. Vanessa caught up to Nicole near the elevators. "You've been behind everything," she said, lowering her voice, as if volume alone could contain the damage. Nicole turned calmly. "Yes." Vanessa shook her head. "All this time. I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Nicole replied, not unkindly. Vanessa exhaled sharply. "Why keep it from me?" Nicole considered the question. "Because I needed the work to speak for itself," she said. "And because I wanted to understand how leadership functioned when it believed no one was watching." Vanessa looked away, shame creeping into her expression. "I treated you like you didn't belong." Nicole nodded once. "You did." The elevator arrived with a soft chime. For a moment, neither of them moved. The distance between them felt heavier than the silence they stood in. When the doors opened, Nicole stepped inside without hesitation. Vanessa followed, standing a careful distance away. "I was wrong," she said quietly, the words difficult but necessary. Nicole met her eyes, searching for sincerity. "This isn't about being right," she said. "It's about perspective." The elevator descended slowly. Vanessa's voice softened. "You never defended yourself." Nicole gave a small, restrained smile. "I didn't need to. I was building something." The doors opened again, revealing the lobby below, bright, busy, indifferent to their private reckoning. Vanessa hesitated. "Where does this leave us?" she asked. Nicole stepped out. That depends on what you do next, she said. Respect isn't automatic. It's practiced. Vanessa nodded, absorbing the weight of that truth. As Nicole walked away, Vanessa understood something she had never considered before. Power didn't always announce itself through titles or volume. Sometimes it worked quietly, patiently, waiting for the moment when denial was no longer possible. Outside, sunlight spilled across the building's glass exterior as Nicole paused briefly, breathing in the calm that followed confrontation. The company was stable now. Its future was no longer fragile. She had achieved what she set out to do without spectacle, without shortcuts. Behind her, the building hummed with renewed purpose, unaware of the quiet shift that had just occurred within its walls. Nicole adjusted her grip on the folder and walked toward her car, unhurried. She knew challenges still lay ahead, board politics, market shifts, difficult decisions, but she was ready. Inside the building, Vanessa remained by the elevator doors, watching through the glass as her sister disappeared into the crowd. For the first time, she saw Nicole clearly, not as the younger sibling she had dismissed, but as a force she had failed to recognize. And that realization would follow her long after the meeting room emptied, reshaping every assumption she would make from that day forward. The following weeks unfolded with a steadier rhythm inside the company. Decisions that once stalled in endless meetings now moved with clarity. Nicole remained intentionally measured in her presence, attending only key sessions, reviewing reports late at night, and communicating through concise, thoughtful directives. Her influence was felt more than seen. Departments adjusted quickly to the new strategy, and morale improved as uncertainty faded. Vanessa watched these changes closely, no longer from a place of control but from observation. She noticed how Nicole never undermined anyone publicly, never corrected mistakes with humiliation. Instead, she asked questions that forced people to think deeper. Vanessa began to understand that leadership did not always look like authority, it often looked like restraint. Each time Vanessa passed colleagues in the hallway, she felt the quiet shift in perception. People were more careful now, more aware. Not fearful, just attentive. Nicole had changed the temperature of the organization without raising her voice. And Vanessa, once so certain of her place, found herself re-evaluating not only her sister, but her own approach to power. One afternoon, Vanessa requested a private meeting. Nicole agreed without hesitation. They sat across from each other in a smaller conference room, the kind designed for reflection rather than performance. "I owe you an apology," Vanessa said, her voice steady but sincere. "Not just for that day, but for years." Nicole listened without interruption. Vanessa continued. "I measured success loudly. Titles, visibility, recognition. I assumed silence meant absence." Nicole folded her hands calmly. "Silence can be strategy," she said. Vanessa nodded. "I see that now." The conversation was not dramatic, but it was honest. There were no grand reconciliations, only acknowledgement. Nicole did not offer reassurance or forgiveness on command. She simply said, "Change shows itself over time." That response stayed with Vanessa. As they stood to leave, Vanessa realized something important. Nicole was not interested in winning old arguments. She was focused on what came next. And that difference, more than the investment or authority, defined the gap between them. Q2 closed stronger than projected. Revenue stabilized, partnerships regained confidence, and the board approved long-term growth plans without hesitation. Nicole reviewed the final reports from her home office, satisfied but not celebratory. Success, to her, was not an endpoint. It was a responsibility. She thought back to the moment she had first agreed to invest, when the company was vulnerable and desperate for quiet support. She had taken the risk because she believed in systems, not applause. The market responded accordingly. Inside the company, trust rebuilt itself slowly, reinforced by consistency. Vanessa adjusted her leadership style, listening more, speaking less, watching outcomes instead of optics. Their relationship remained professional, cautious, but no longer distorted by assumption. Nicole preferred it that way. Familiarity had once clouded judgment. Distance now allowed respect to grow naturally. The balance felt earned. And as Nicole closed the report, she understood that influence did not need proximity. It needed clarity, discipline, and the patience to let results speak when words would only distract. Several months later, Nicole attended another board meeting, this time without incident. No one questioned her presence. No one underestimated her role. She contributed, listened, and exited without ceremony. As she walked through the building, Employees greeted her politely, some with quiet gratitude. She acknowledged them all, never lingering. Outside, the city moved at its usual pace, unaware of the quiet architecture holding businesses together behind the scenes. Nicole reflected on how easily power could be misunderstood when judged by surface impressions. She had once allowed herself to be invisible, not out of fear, but intention. That invisibility had given her freedom to observe, to plan, to choose the moment when presence mattered. The reveal had changed how others saw her, but it had not changed how she saw herself. That consistency grounded her. She knew now that recognition was optional. Impact was not. And the difference between the two defined everything she valued. Vanessa watched from her office window as Nicole crossed the plaza below. There was no resentment this time, only clarity. She finally understood that her greatest mistake had not been underestimating Nicole's success, but misunderstanding her nature. Nicole had never sought validation. She had sought leverage, sustainability, and control over outcomes. Vanessa turned back to her desk, determined to lead differently. Not quieter, wiser. Outside, Nicole disappeared into the flow of the city, indistinguishable from anyone else, exactly as she preferred. She had stepped into the room when it mattered, spoken when it counted, and withdrawn once the work was done. Power, she knew, was not about being seen. It was about being undeniable. The final phase of the year arrived with little fanfare but strong results. The company no longer operated in recovery mode. It had shifted into deliberate growth. New partnerships were signed quietly, chosen for stability rather than spectacle. Nicole reviewed proposals selectively, declining more than she approved. Her criteria were consistent: long-term value, ethical leadership, and resilience under pressure. Internally, the company's tone continued to mature. Meetings became shorter, clearer, and more outcome-driven. Vanessa noticed that people spoke with greater confidence now, less concerned with hierarchy and more focused on execution. The culture Nicole had influenced from a distance had taken root. It no longer depended on her presence. That, to Nicole, was success. Systems that required constant authority eventually failed. Systems that functioned independently endured. She stepped back further, trusting the structure she had helped build. The company no longer needed saving. It needed stewardship. Nicole declined an invitation to join daily operations, choosing instead to remain strategic. She understood the temptation of control and refused it deliberately. Power, when overused, became fragile. She preferred durability. From her vantage point, she monitored performance metrics, approved capital releases, and intervened only when necessary. Vanessa, now more self-aware, handled her role with renewed discipline. She no longer confused confidence with dominance. Their interactions were professional and measured, built on earned respect rather than obligation. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no emotional speeches. What grew between them was steadier, mutual understanding shaped by experience instead of assumption. That felt more honest. Nicole had learned that some relationships did not need closeness to be healthy. They needed boundaries and truth. And those, finally, were in place. At the end of the fiscal year, the board released a private performance summary. The numbers spoke clearly. The company had exceeded its recovery targets, stabilized its workforce, and positioned itself competitively in the market. Richard Hale sent Nicole a brief message of acknowledgement, thanking her for restraint as much as for leadership. She appreciated that more than public praise. Recognition, when loud, often distorted purpose. She closed her laptop and allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The risk she had taken months earlier had been calculated, but the personal cost had been less predictable. Still, she had no regrets. She had chosen timing over validation, discipline over exposure. The outcome justified every quiet decision she had made. Vanessa learned something lasting from the experience. She began mentoring younger staff differently, paying closer attention to those who worked without spotlight. She stopped assuming silence meant disinterest. In doing so, she uncovered talent she might once have overlooked. The lesson Nicole embodied reshaped her leadership more than any formal training could have. Though they no longer spoke often, Vanessa carried that influence forward. She understood now that authority was not proven by volume, and confidence did not require performance. These realizations settled into her work, changing how she led and how she listened. Nicole returned to her routines outside the company: projects, investments, and a life carefully balanced. She moved through spaces unnoticed, by choice, grounded in the knowledge of what she had built. The boardroom moment had been necessary, but it was never the destination. It was simply a reveal, not a transformation. The transformation had happened long before, in silence. She had stepped into the room when it mattered and stepped away when the work was done. That was the discipline she trusted. Looking back, Nicole understood that the greatest power she held was not financial leverage or strategic insight. It was patience. She had waited without bitterness, acted without ego, and revealed herself without apology. Those choices shaped outcomes more reliably than force ever could. She had not corrected misconceptions with arguments. She had corrected them with results. And results, once undeniable, required no explanation. In the end, there was nothing left to prove. The company stood stable. The roles were clear. The past assumptions no longer mattered. Nicole moved forward exactly as she always had, quietly, deliberately, and in control of her own timing. Those who once underestimated her now understood something they would not forget. Power does not always announce itself when it arrives. Sometimes it waits, unseen, until the moment when its presence can no longer be denied, and then it leaves just as calmly as it came. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Your support helps bring more powerful stories like this to life.